I want to, before we get into the actual customer use cases and technology, I just want to show you the perspective of a CISO as it pertains to microsegmentation and why it hasn't been adopted in the masses and at scale. And I think it's a valuable approach or a valuable view of this problem. You know, truthfully, there are overlords, CISOs, they own everything, they make all the decisions, right? So, and this is valuable information. Why has it been, Forrester asked, why has it been so hard for your organizations to deploy at scale segmentation? Every single cybersecurity standard, every single major cybersecurity organization has said, whether it's NIST, IAC, all of them have said, just segment your network. It's important. It's a great first place to start. But it's harder than that. Segmentation, my friend Zach says it best, actually. If you haven't heard of Zach Schaefer, he's an incredible advanced services engineer at Cisco who then actually has joined us. And he says it best. He's like, segmentation is like flossing. You go to the dentist and the dentist is like, Dana, you need to floss. It's good for you. It'll save you time and money and make your life better and things won't hurt as much. And then we're like, yeah, no problem, we'll do it. And go home and you don't segment or you don't floss because it's a pain, right? It's a pain. It's time consuming, it's manual. And well, you know, pro tip here, get a water flosser is so much easier. And marketing is in my title, so I can say we're like the water flossers of segmentation, maybe. I'll see if that one, see if my CMO lets me say that.
Bundling opportunity.
Yeah, all right. But there's two things on this slide.
You put your name on those.
That's right, exactly. I should have given that out as the gift here. But you know, there's two things I want to point out on this slide. I'm not going to go through all of them. This is pretty self-explanatory. But analysis paralysis is something that a lot of our customers have faced. And I have a case study about this, but the truth is that when you actually sit down to look at your entire network end to end, to understand where are my devices, what are my devices, what are they doing, how do I segment them, how do I build my policies, where do I even start? A lot of times it's such a massive project and there's so much complexity in the deployment of some solution to solve those problems, it gets put in the back burner. It's like, we'll fix these other problems first. Those are easier. We have a solution for it. We'll deal with that, and we'll come back to segmentation later. And you know, and then it lags, and it lags, and it lags, and we ever get it done. Not entirely, not completely. And so we've focused on a lot of that in our platform. You've heard us say rapid time to value. You're going to see how our product simplifies a lot of this from the deployment process. The long pole in the tent of deploying a solution is eliminated with Elisity. You're now focused on building policy and getting policy enforced. And then the last thing on this slide I want to talk about is enforcement anxiety. A lot of the customers I work with, whether that's talking to them at trade shows or even just discussing on the product management side, I get to talk with customers all the time to see what features they want in our product, and I build them into our solution. It's a really fun job. But they have no problem building policy with our solution. They can do it all day long. It's so simple. But when it comes to enforcing, everybody's a little afraid. Nobody wants to press the big red button and lose their job potentially. They don't want to accidentally shut down a manufacturing line. They don't want to cause an outage and the company loses money. So there has to be a way to instill confidence in our customers and in the engineers using our product so that when they're ready to enforce, they know exactly what is enforced. They know exactly what's going to happen to that asset. And so, again, another thing that we've embedded into our platform. This is a customer that we've worked with as a design partner. We were very fortunate to work with GSK. I'm sure you've heard of GSK, one of the largest, if not the largest, pharmaceutical manufacturers in the world. Very large network, very complex network. They had a mandate to get segmentation in place. They had no knack, they had no visibility. They went down the traditional path of a big box vendor solution, deploying a monolithic application on-prem, upgrading switches and getting everything ready. And after 2.5 years, almost 3 years, they got 1.5 sites done. that doesn't fly for a CISO. That doesn't fly for an organization. The goal is to mitigate the risk as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, without any disruption to the business. So, of course, that wasn't working with their standard approach to segmentation, and they eventually killed the project off. Even though they had a lot of money to dedicate to it, they killed it off. And it was just very fortunate that we had this beautiful marriage between GSK and Elisity. And this is why we exist today. That problem statement I mentioned through the origin story, of course, important. But then we realized through these discussions with our design partners that there's so much more we can solve for, and we exist because of this. Now, GSK was stuck in that analysis paralysis mode until we came on board and helped them visualize what's on a network across both their IT and their OT environment and pull it all together and show them how we built policy. And they're now deploying sites in 17 minutes, and they're doing 12 per month. Now, they could do way more than 12 per month, but they're doing their due diligence, like I mentioned earlier, and they have change windows, right? So they gotta abide by their change window procedures. So they could pump these out real quick if they wanted to. And actually, internally, it was so cool to watch the Slack channels as we were deploying at scale for GSK. Our advanced services engineers, our CX guys, we call them, guys and gals, they had like this internal competition. How quickly and how accurately can we deploy GSK sites? And this is the winner, right? 17 minutes. And I think that guy still has the trophy. I don't think anybody's beat him just yet. But the point here is that Mike Elmore, in this case, a CISO, who I'm friends with, I've known for some time, our CEO knows him very well. If you've heard him speak, fantastic speaker. He's always at the cybersecurity conferences. Make sure you get to see him if you get a chance to. He realized that 3 years and 3,000 change windows, or whatever it's going to be, to deploy their entire network just wasn't going to work. So this blew his mind, and we're going to be done by next year, their entire environment. Very exciting. This is another customer that, of course, also wanted rapid time to value, needed to deploy the solution quickly to mitigate the problems that they were facing or that they could potentially face. Before I get into this, I'll say one interesting thing here is that what we're seeing is that it's not just zero-day exploits that are being leveraged by bad actors. There's all the known exploits that just nobody's taken time to patch for, to segment for, that are being taken advantage of. Right? They're using velocity to compromise organizations around the world that have not done anything about it yet. They haven't segmented the network, so ransomware can proliferate and propagate with freedom. They can do reconnaissance attacks with freedom. Half the time, you don't even know if they're in your network. So triangulating visibility was really important for this customer, because they had all sorts of platforms or collecting identity about the assets and the users and the applications on their network, all doing their own thing. Nothing brought it all together in one simple view, one easily digestible platform, and they couldn't use that data to build their segments. And so just naturally, because Elisity is an identity aggregator, as a part of our platform, that became their source of truth. And it better be their source of truth, because if you're doing identity-based and context-based segmentation, the platform that you're using better have the best view of absolutely everything on your network, whether it's a user or a device. And so just naturally, we became that for them, and it was beautiful. And we could also then feed back into their either non-existent CMDB or their half-baked CMDB implementation. We all know CMDBs, right? They're cool, they're great, but how valuable or how valid is and accurate is the entire CMDB? Most of the time, CMDBs are a mess. Everybody's messing with them. Different owners do different things in CMDBs. We helped them not only adopt a proper CMDB, but make it super accurate. Okay? Now, here's kind of a process flow of that last customer on how they accomplished this. I'll just go through it real quickly. I really like this slide because it's like a step-by-step. It reminds me of packet walks that we used to do. I used to do when I was working at Cisco and doing Cisco Live presentations for Viptela. I would do these like control plane, data plane packet walks. But our course is a lot simpler, right? Because our product is relatively simple. So this step number one was to aggregate all the identity that they had in the network, whether it was a third-party device discovery engine like Armis or Nozomi or Clarity or Tenable. We've heard of these solutions. They're fantastic. They do aggregation of identity, and they also figure out the threat landscape within your network. They aggregate identity from EDRs, CrowdStrike, and Microsoft Defender, maybe an MDM, Active Directory, of course. Maybe they had a spreadsheet. A lot of customers we talk to still use spreadsheets to identify the attributes and the devices that, on their network, or custom databases. All of that is pulled into what we call identity graph. What is identity graph? We'll talk more about that in a bit. It's actually one of the components of our product that I manage within our company. And once it's all in there, and you have one place to visualize all this and see the picture, the full picture of the network, you can then triangulate on your accuracy. You can figure out quickly what's verified or unverified devices, what should be on the network, what do we not know about, should we remediate that, should we kick it off the network. We can learn additional device attributes of these assets, make decisions based off that additional context. And then once you have all this information, it makes it a lot easier then to implement policy groups or match criteria that pull your assets into a container that you then apply policy to. So I'll talk about this when I get to the demo, how we have different types of policy groups or methods to aggregate assets based on identity data. We have local ones, we have global ones, but I'll go into that momentarily. But we made it really easy to group your assets. And so when new assets came online or were discovered, they just followed the match criteria that was pre-created in those devices immediately into the group, immediately enforced. Of course, we have an analytics platform, so they could go review what's talking to what, look at traffic mapping, and make it easy to understand what should we kick out of the network, what's real, what's rogue, and then feed all that data back into their CMDB, in this case, ServiceNow. We have a very robust API and mechanisms to export absolutely anything in our product out of our product. So we don't just ingest an identity graph. You can export everything that's been ingested and processed outbound. And that's what they were doing here. This last one is a healthcare provider in the US, a top 10 healthcare provider in the US, a very big one actually. And I love anything to do with healthcare. I'm obsessed with medical stats. If I didn't do networking, I probably would have been a physician. I have an obsession with that. And the annoying thing for my girlfriend is that she is a physician, and I drive her crazy with all like the stuff I talk about. I'm collecting it right now on my ring. And I love talking to customers in the healthcare space. And of course, other than all the problems I mentioned before around rapid time to value, and of course, non-disruptive implementation, because it's a hospital, we can't bring down anything to do with patient critical care. Other than that, they were concerned about the resource optimization problem. They were looking at traditional solutions. Specifically, I think in this case, it was a fabric-based solution. You can make your guess which one it was. And they realized that if they were going to deploy this at scale after doing their discovery and their POCs with these platforms, that it would increase their FTEs significantly. And it says 8+ there, but actually it was a lot more than that. It just looked ridiculous. But truthfully, when they looked at this at scale, way too difficult to operate and manage after it's been deployed, whenever it does get deployed. But looking at Elicity's platform, because of how we simplified a lot of it, even if they were to grow their network, hospitals and healthcare networks are always making acquisitions and putting more into their fold. Even if they added more, our platform continued around the same, required the same level of FTEs to manage it. So that was a huge key differentiator and selling point for this organization. Okay, now we can get into some of the fun stuff. all that sales stuff is out of the way. It's not really sales stuff. I think it's actually very interesting. Yes, Mary.
I have a question. You mentioned like 17 minutes for like to onboard the site. I think it was like 30 minutes on the last slide.
Yeah.
From like initial like, hey, we're gonna go with this solution to, hey, we can kick it off at this site. What is that time period typically like?
I love that question, Mary. And I would have an even better answer for you if I was in sales, but I left sales purposefully. I like technology. I was in sales for a while, and I was like, I like the tech. But I still am very involved with the customers in the deployment. So from the moment they started talking to us, it was a couple discussions, of course, to understand how our product works. But our POC process, or proof of value process, as they call it now, is literally half a day at most. Why? Because there's very little for the customer to do on premise to deploy our product. And I'm going to get into this, but a lot of the complexity that we're used to doing in POVs or deploying a solution has been packaged up and delivered as a service in the cloud. Just like Viptela did, right? If you remember IWAN, nothing to bash IWAN, I was an IWAN god. I wrote the Bible.
Go ahead and bash IWAN.
I was an IWAN god. I spent years traveling the world deploying and writing Bibles for deployment for IWAN and doing it for everywhere in the world. And it was, not easy. I'll say it. That's where I'm going to leave it. Right there. Yeah?
It was complicated.
Yeah, exactly. It was complicated. And
painful.
And a lot of what Viptela did, I don't want to bring everything back to Viptela, but there's just, it actually does make sense, was to abstract a lot of complexity and deliver the control plane that was complex that people were deploying and managing themselves, deliver as a service, handle it all. VPN 10, enter, bam, remember? Yeah. Control plane is configured for you, data plane is configured for you, end-to-end, everything is done for you. Our POC process is so simple because we've done the same thing. So half a day, they're pretty much, they've seen the value. They've already applied policy in their test sites within that half a day. I'm not joking. We can even do it quicker. That's usually, compensating for some little error issues here and there. From there, it comes down to, all right, let's pick the sites where we want to pilot this now. And that's where you move into the 17-minute timer, right? Or the 30-minute or whatever it is, right? You'll see when I get to the architecture how we've made that. I know I'm making all these claims, but you'll see the approach that we've taken is to leverage the existing infrastructure, the existing networking, the topology that exists today, and build on top of it.